The Wallumer list was actually crazy. If they had the time and resources and money to sit with everyone that went in there, we would have so much less reoffenders rates, so much less incarceration rates.
All right, welcome to the next episode of the Impact Policy Podcast. I'm joined by a stellar panel of friends today, and it's a very special episode for us here at Impact Policy HQ because we celebrate our first birthday as an organisation. So I thought only fitting to have some of the key players on the Impact Policy team be a part of the yarn that we have today. I want to be able to reflect on the journey that we've been on at Impact Policy, some of the highlights, some of the learnings, the Impact Policy podcast in itself, and overall just have a little bit of fun. So if you do follow this podcast and you've followed the journey so far, you'll learn a little bit about behind the scenes of Impact Policy. And we hope that this is something that you really enjoy and join the journey with us as we keep moving forward. So
I'm Andrew Amanaki. I am a director of Amanaki Studios, and we are the partner, the video partners for Impact Policy. Yeah, we help drive a lot of the imagery that you might see across the projects that they deliver and help tell those stories.
Yeah, number one comms guy in the business, Andrew Amanaki. Thanks so much.
I'm Maddie. I'm the project officer here at Impact Policy.
And I'm Holly. I'm also a project officer here at Impact Policy.
What was sort of the first project for you, Sam, starting Impact Policy, and what are some reflections from that from then to now?
Yes, that's a good question. The first project that we ever worked on, I think the three of us touched that, was we're working with the University of New South Wales, and we're doing some social policy work there. And so that was really exciting project for us because it really opened up our eyes in terms of the opportunity for Impact Policy to really add value to, the sector. So but some of the highlights for me for that, which I still remember, I wrote about it recently, I think for NAIDOC, was we did some stuff around, there was a social policy conference, and we had these expert elders and community members that were based in regional New South Wales.
Oh, yeah, this one.
Yeah, and these conferences and these spaces are really places that can be quite exclusive to community members. I often see these conferences and spaces often talking about solving these problems, and for the most part, the people that are affected by those problems aren't in the room or aren't positioned as the experts, in those rooms as well. And so what I really remember from that and took away from that is we took some Teams interviews that we did online, and with your support as well, we cut them together and made them into, because it was a online conference, and then so we gave the opportunity for those community members to then have their presentations replayed in the conference setting. But what was really significant about that was the impact of that afterwards. So those community members who were then online for that conference felt, in my opinion, so much more empowered to then participate in the live Q&A because their messaging had been really communicated clearly and concisely, and it really positioned themselves as experts in that sort of conference world. But that was our first Impact Policy project, really. I have to give a massive shout out to UNSW and Peter McGilvray and Ruth McCausland and the team there for really taking a shot at us and giving us an opportunity to do some good stuff. It was, a bit of a catapult for us, I think.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing for me working on that project was that we got the privilege to take a really deep dive into flexible learning as well, and looking at it through best practice and through the lens of a First Nations approach, which is something that not a lot of people have done before. So to put together a really comprehensive set of guidelines around this is what we find flexible learning actually is. These are the best practice approaches, and this is how it's going to serve especially First Nations communities and vulnerable young people. That was really very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was even more significant. Everyone at this table has had some sort of connection with flexible learning in some capacity, either like working or personally as a young person. And so, yeah, I think for us, we have that personal connection to the work as well, which made it even more significant too. Yeah.
I feel like this is a great spot to jump into sort of like why, I guess, you specifically, Sam, started Impact Policy, and I guess what that project meant or confirmed for you, moving forward into the next projects that you had to come.
Yeah, totally. I think, the biggest sort of motivation for Impact Policy come out of, living in the second lockdown in COVID here in Sydney, and just really being at a bit of a sort of struggle personally in terms of where I was going and what I wanted to do. I think me and you always talked for a number of years about ideas and wanting to explore different opportunities to do things, and so, well, I think, for a long time, the consultancy word for me as a community member was always a bit of a dirty word. We didn't have, our communities, for the most part, don't always have the most over-consultated people on the planet, and consultants sometimes have a bit of a reputation of flying in and flying out, and sometimes doing more harm than good, and I'm really passionate about social policy, and in the Aboriginal affairs space, I'd often see sometimes a bit of a disconnect between, just cultural capability and technical capability, and the balance between the two. And I really felt like we had a real opportunity to add some value to the sector in the space there. And I think that UNSW job came during lockdown. So, my mate reached out and asked if I wanted to do some advisory work there with their team for a short period. And I guess that really reaffirmed, like she said to me, she's like, you're basically working as a consultant in a lot of ways. And it just like the light bulb went off. It was like, fuck, she was right, And if there was ever a time to jump in the deep end and give it a crack, that was the time. But then I got really excited by the opportunity it could present to do things differently. I think because I've grown up in community, and I feel like, in the spaces that we work in the social policy space, I have a lot of lived experience. I felt like it was a real opportunity to bring a lot of integrity to how this work sort of is done, how we amplify the stories and the voices of lived experience, and how we also connect some of these parts of policy that often work in isolation. So, experts like yourself that are, work in the communications and storytelling space are so critical to policy and research and evidence, and bringing the community along on that journey as well. And so I sort of saw this opportunity to bring these, different pieces of the puzzle together in terms of how we think about working in the policy world and consultancy world. And yeah, that's sort of where the journey's sort of taken us, But I think the why ultimately though is to be able to have an impact back into the communities that we've come from and that we're connected to.
Yeah,
that's the ultimate why.
Yeah.
There's no motivation to be a multi-million-dollar national consulting firm. It's about doing work with really strong values. That was one of the first things we did, was get really clear on those values. But then to be able to have a really defined and measurable impact on the communities in which we're from. So, like me and Maddie grew up together as young people in different generations in the same community. And it's been, I guess one of the biggest highlights for us over the past year is to, even as a startup, be able to see the tangible impact that we're having back into our communities. So,
yeah, I think that's mad. I think that's a big reason why we partner with you guys and have done for so long. I think it's a great spot to see, a job can sometimes just be a job, but obviously impact policy, it can definitely be more than that. For you guys, why impact policy, and what has the experience been like for you guys?
For me, and I do want to take this opportunity to just publicly embarrass you and
No, I'm an introvert.
and recognise you and honour you for the work that you've done so far, because I don't think you realise, like, even when you're just talking now about the connection with Andrew, but you're like the spider that's weaved the web between all of these different partners, and that's what's given Impact Policy its foundation and its strength. And you know, that's your work. You have so many people on the podcast, and you form these partnerships where you're amplifying, you know, people's voices, and you're empowering people. And you know, I think, you know, you need to be honoured for that, and you need to take some of your own medicine sometimes.
Yeah. I think I've worked in like so many different organisations, Indigenous sectors, non-Indigenous sectors, and I think what separates Impact Policy from them is that it feels like a family, because obviously we grew up in the same community. You went to the same school as my siblings. I've known you from Wave. So it doesn't feel like a job, even though we're working, one. And I think the other thing is I feel like we're generally making a difference in community. I feel like, especially in some of the most recent projects, being so close to home, it's just made me feel like I have a bit of a purpose. And I feel like it's just where I'm supposed to be when it comes to working for our mob, because it's more than a job. It's like it's our identity, it's our culture, and yeah, that's I feel like why Impact Policy.
Yeah, that's it. And you were one of the first people to work with us at Impact Policy, you know. And for anyone listening, you know, you got a young bub at home who's about 18 months now or something.
Yeah, she's nearly 2.
And you know, when you first did a bit of work with us at the start, you know, she was a newborn.
She was a newborn, and then I was like, I can't.
Juggling a newborn on Teams calls and all this sort of stuff was amazing. But you know, naturally, you needed to take some time to be present with that sort of stuff. But it's so, you know, over the last half of the year, it's been so amazing to have you back in the team and doing the amazing stuff that you're doing as well. But I think that's the really important thing for us as well when we talk about family and stuff, is that when we work in a space that's like really about community and social sort of spaces, so we have to recognise that like work looks different too. And if you have a family, or if you know have that sort of stuff going on, it always takes priority, but it adds value to your work and your team. It's not a deficit, and so it's about shifting the lens around how we sort of see that. And it's something that, like, I feel so proud that one of the core people from our team was working with us when her baby was, you know, that that Impact Policy was a place, a workspace, and a place where that was fostered, and people felt comfortable to be able to bring their full selves and their families to work, as opposed to other places where like it'd be too shame, or like you just wouldn't feel safe, you know.
I think there's a level of authenticity about how you've built Impact Policy, and it just comes from your character as well. But that's also really what's drawn me here and has kept me here is there's no bullshit. There's just, you know, I see it in the way that you kind of navigate which projects you want to take if they're not aligned with our values, if they're not kind of resonating with, you know, the impact that we want to have, then you're not about it. And I really respect that.
Yeah, thanks. And it's been tough in a lot of ways, because it's when we first started, like being an Aboriginal owned and led business, we work, you know, we have sort of at main areas that we work in around engagement, you know, research, communications, probably, you know, we do a lot of stuff within that space, but they're sort of our 3 pillars. But the services that we produce within those areas are applicable across the whole social policy world. But for 90% of the work we get engaged in is for Aboriginal affairs, because there's such a demand for Aboriginal business and services and service delivery. And so, it has been challenging in a lot of ways to work out like what's the most appropriate work that we should be taking on and what shouldn't we. and all that sort of stuff as well. It's and sometimes you kick yourself looking back. Oh fuck, should have taken that opportunity, you know, or you take something on that actually doesn't turn out to go how you sort of would have wanted it to go. I guess that's the journey, hey, like that we've been on. Yeah.
That's the best thing about it. We're all learning every single day and changing and
Yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, everything you guys spoke about is, I think, a big reason why I guess impact policy is like super successful, right? And what they do, you know, very aligned with what they want to do, very aligned with what their mission is, very aligned with the people who they work with. And so in saying that, what have been some of the highlights or projects that you guys have worked on today?
Our first video communications sort of project was Race to Home.
My favorite project was probably that, mainly because it was like,
It was such a small one.
yeah,
really.
but I think it was because it was the first time we got to work together without any sort of like, I guess, higher up strings attached.
Yep,
You know what I mean?
yeah, totally.
And I think it just speaks like sort of volumes to what like you do, that like everything. I think like as a creator, sometimes we're pushed like side to side with what I guess, you know, the objectives are of the company, not so much what the community organization want. I think it's great that like both of our you know, values align on some of that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So that we're able to deliver a project like Whole and Whole that, you know, we both feel really good about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That was probably like, it was probably a favourite just because we were like you finally had like, you know, jump ship and we were able to like work together again.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
thought that was nice.
Definitely. I think for me in the storytelling and communication space, probably like I couldn't go past the Koori Knockout exhibition.
Yeah.
So like
Was it that yarn with Uncle V?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, it was a challenging one. You know, some of our old people can talk, and you know, for people listening that work in the comms space, they'll understand this. You know, our brief was a series of 3 to 5 minute videos for this exhibition at the State Library, and you know, some of the interviews you've just got to hold space for those old people out of respect. So we're an hour and a half interviews. You know, knowing that we've got to cut this down to 3 to 5 minutes was tough, but really special, I think, to have that, to be invited in to be a part of that exhibition, and to be able to be a significant part of our history. You know, the Koori Knockout is such a massive part of Koori culture in New South Wales, and many non-Aboriginal communities won't understand that. So for us to be able to help tell that story about the why is a real privilege, personally and culturally and professionally, so early in Impact Policy's journey.
Yeah, true.
And and I think also, you know, like me and Josh, your brother, we did a series down in Nowra with the South Coast Black Cockatoos, and it always sits with me, that one, because it was challenging in terms of the shoot, but the impact in terms of the stories that we got were probably the most powerful, you know, because, and I think we've reflected and talked about that in the past in terms of how, you know, sometimes it doesn't matter where you're at and what you're doing. If you've got the right people in the room and there's that really power in the message, that sort of carries over everything. And yeah, so I love that piece, you know, it's one of my favourite pieces that we've worked on, I think,
Yeah.
as
Yeah,
well.
for sure.
So
Definitely close second for me.
yeah, massive,
Yeah.
Your favourite should be the one that you did with me. But that's
Well, we can't talk about that. So,
the best, my favourite, well, anything involved with community engagement. Every time we get to sit there and go out and speak to the elders, I know we only have like 3 minutes or two, but I could sit there and listen to them tell their stories for hours, even though we can't. But it's been amazing, and it's exactly when you were saying that your values align with impacts as well. It's so true. Like your SAR, Dell's Māori and SAR, and it felt like I was nervous going in because obviously dealing with elders and the sensitive topics around some of the projects that we've done, it is sometimes worrying not having an Indigenous representative, but having the same values, the same kind of family dynamic in your culture as our culture. It works perfectly. Everyone's so comfortable. it felt like home and family, and Del there making cup of teas for some of the elders with us, and always cleaning up after himself, putting the glad wrap. It's just the perfect work environment that I love, and I love being a part of it. It was such an honour being able to be with community, with mob, and having you guys in it too. It's like a big team, big family.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people underestimate the soft skills around holding space and engagement. Like, and I think when we did that project on Sorry Day in the city, like your ability to just hold space and engage with the elders that were there. A lot of mob do that naturally, but not everyone does it naturally as well.
True.
And I think being able to do that do that well is so critical for engagement. And I think one of the other things as well is around there's a lot of amazing non-Aboriginal professionals that are great at engagement and communications and stuff. But I think there's a lot that can be said about black spaces, particularly when we're working in projects where there's issues around trauma and issues that have impacted our communities. I think there's a lot of power in being able to have being able to create black spaces, black professionals and engagement specialists to do that sort of work. I think doesn't say that non-Aboriginal professionals don't have a place in those spaces and can't do great work, but I always feel a lot more comfortable going into a project where I know that there's heavy impact of intergenerational trauma if I've got a team that's culturally diverse, Aboriginal led, and has those community values as well. So I think that's something that we really hold, I really value it in impact policy for how we do our work across anything. And I think, the impact of that's clear because we've been able to produce some really significant content for clients around really sensitive stuff. And I think it's only because we bring those ingredients when we do that work that we can, get there. Yeah.
It's like when we were growing up, it was like that. If we were ever involved in anything like that, sensitive topics, if I walked into a room and I didn't see someone that was like me, I didn't open up.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to talk to them. I didn't want to bar of it, especially if it was about me. So being able to be on this side, going into the community space, knowing that I'm just like you, we're mob. We're not trying to make money. We're not lying. We're not trying to deceive you. We're here for a purpose, and it's to better our mob together. I'm just getting paid for it.
Always a bonus, right?
I'm really enjoying what I'm doing at the moment, so working in language revitalisation. I think for me, it's just been the research pieces in general.
Yeah.
So when we've been privileged enough to add value through research, and I think the thing that I really love about that is, it's challenging those assumptions that are out there and actually going into community and talking to people and listening and gathering real data, and then being able to kind of say, well, actually, this is what we're hearing, and this is perhaps, some recommendations moving forward. I think that's been really, really valuable and, privileged to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that qualitative stuff's really important for us, being able to, and it always comes back to just, being able to connect and hold space, and really hear the voices and represent them in our work. I think for the most part, I think as a team, we're really passionate about highlighting the voices of participants that don't necessarily get represented in research. So, we've done some good stuff already around that sort of space, and I think that's probably a passion area for us. I feel like it's something we do really well. We've got some exciting stuff coming up where we're doing some co-design work around an evaluation of the Wallama list, which is like a alternative court in New South Wales for Aboriginal people that have been caught up in the justice system. And one of the most passionate things for us with this piece of work is the ability for you know, the actual people that are impacted by those systems to be able to shape how they participate in research. So not just like holding the space for the research, but even taking it one step earlier and being able to say to participants and elders involved in that process, like, how do you want to have your voice heard? What's the best way? What's the proper and most safest way for you to be able to feel comfortable to participate and bring your whole self there? You know, is it in a group? Is it one-on-one? Do you want your voice recorded? Do you not want it written? Like, how best can people understand what you're trying to say? And so it's like this whole different way, I feel, in terms of us thinking about how we do this sort of work as well, you know, and really trying to bring our people along at each step of that journey too. So yeah, I think it's exciting times. Yeah.
Being able to sit in the Wallumer list was actually crazy. That was so cool. Like, I've been in and out of, I've gone to courts for like family members. If they had capacity to have every single Indigenous person that was in and out of custody, if they had the time and resources and money to sit with everyone that went in there, we would have so much less reoffenders rates, so much less like incarceration rates, because they actually give a crap about these kids. So from just the 3 or 4 that I saw on the day, the judge was crying because he like cared that much. We had 2 elders that were there and wanted to help, and everyone around the corner, everyone was equal. Which in the courtrooms, if you've ever been, it's never. There's always a hierarchy. It's intimidating. It's scary. It gives everybody anxiety. It was not anxious at all. It was not. It was the best, and I can't wait to actually be more involved in that, because being personally, like having siblings in and out of incarceration, it actually is really hopeful for the future.
Totally.
I really hope that.
Totally.
I can't wait for that.
I think our biggest challenge is when we think about projects like that is how do we make sure that the people that have been through those projects, that their voices are centred. You know, some of those participants potentially are in custody at the moment. So how do we find a way to be able to access them in custody, to be able to give them an opportunity to have their voice, you know, heard or participate in projects like this? I think that's a real critical thing for us in impact policy, is like, we don't want to shy away from the challenging barriers, you know, because people will be like, oh, well, they're locked up, you know, like, so you won't be able to get to them. It's like, it's not good enough. Like, there has to be another, like, you know, there's AVL, you know, links that we can potentially explore. There's other ways we can explore access inside the prisons. There's got to be a way where we can try and do things differently. And I think that's where I get really excited in these sorts of spaces, you know, is the opportunity to do that.
Such a good project.
I think one of the most exciting projects for us that fizzled out though was we got asked to work on the Sydney Harbour Bridge project. So that when for people listening, the Aboriginal flag now flies high on the bridge all year round, rightfully so. And we got engaged to work on the community engagement strategy and consultation part of that project, which was exciting because it was such a high profile project, but also like really tricky because there'd been so much negative media that was coming out about how much it was going to cost to do this. Some of that media wasn't really accurate as well in terms of that sort of stuff, but it just sort of started steamrolling. So, you know, unfortunately that project got abandoned because when they put it up for NAIDOC week, they just left it up there and that was it. So yeah, it was done. But, you know, to be able to say that we got invited into a project that was so significant for this country really is always a nice reflection for us to look back on. You know, we developed some thinking and strategy to help inform their engagement staff, thinking about the diverse Aboriginal communities that are closely connected to where the bridge is located. I think we did that really well, particularly given we've got local connections here and we've grown up here. But yeah, ultimately, like you sort of, you know, you wish you could have got your teeth a little bit more sunk into it too. Yeah.
Just a side note, we don't have to keep it, but it would be really interesting to do a piece on how the community have received that, you know, and how significant it is.
Yeah.
And even
definitely.
just like to promote it, because there might be communities where they're like, oh, I didn't even
Yeah.
notice. So,
I
Definitely.
remember there was a lot of backlash for it,
Yeah, definitely.
which is so dumb.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and that was a big part of what they wanted to understand in the engagements. In the engagement piece was about how do you recognise something like this in terms of its significance for Aboriginal communities, for reconciliation, and all that sort of stuff too. But yeah, it sort of got abandoned pretty quickly. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, yeah, it's been so much different stuff. It's been exciting.
World No Tobacco Day. That was the best. That was so good because I used to smoke.
Yeah, that was your intro. That was your intro to like communications projects.
You know what? What was that like?
That was so good. Except we got put in a haunted hotel.
Yeah,
But it was really, really good. We met One Mob Radio, who
Yeah.
were amazing. The CEO of the
Tracy.
Yeah, Tracy, Annie Tracy, amazing, funny, beautiful. I met all of the community there. That was the best. That was so fun. I felt personally connected to it because I used to smoke, so
Yeah.
it was good to. One of the questions that we asked was like, if you quit in May, you would have saved this amount. What would you have done with that money?
Yeah.
And just seeing everybody be like, oh.
yeah.
Go on holiday.
Yeah, totally.
Well, yeah,
totally.
that was really good and fun. That was my first ever.
Conspace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took a photo of the hotel room key and I framed it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Look, that was, you know, that project was good in a lot of ways. I think for us, you know, really, we did the strategy planning session for that, and we sat around the room and realised that, like, I think it was like 5 out of 7 people in that room had lost someone close to them to smoking related disease, you know, lung cancer, emphysema, all that sort of stuff. And so it was really sort of brought it back to, like, you know, this organisation like Gallambilla, the health service there, is doing really critical work, you know, and it is really impacting our communities, smoking and vaping. And so for us to try and, again, bring some of those stories to light in terms of people's journeys,
Yes.
I think was really important. I think it was tricky too because, you know, like anti-campaigns don't work. Like telling someone not to do something doesn't change their behaviour. So like we'd sit there thinking, how do we best profile these stories, share these experiences in a way that's going to be something that mob want to hear and take something away from. And I think that was the challenge for us, is like sort of debunking and moving away from that anti-smoking, anti-anything message, and like taking more of a strengths-based approach to how we think about communication. And, you know, which I think we did. And it was challenging, some of those interviews, but I think also, you know, we did some with a young person, and she wasn't a confident speaker. She was a lot more quieter. It was probably one of my toughest interviews I've had to facilitate, but, you know, reflecting back on that, like, actually really proud of it, because we want people that consume content about something, the audience, to see themselves in those stories. And so if we're producing a story about young people vaping, they want to hear from another young person that they can see themselves in. Like you said earlier about your participation in stuff as a younger person.
Yeah.
And so for us, like, in a lot of ways, I was happy that she wasn't like so polished and well-spoken and presentable, because the other people that are just like her are going to hear that and understand that she's actually really sharing, what she's sharing is real,
Yeah.
and they might take something from that. So, yeah. I've really enjoyed a lot of the pro bono stuff that we've got to do. And I think, like, to be honest, like, you know, it's our first birthday, but I think like that pro bono stuff has actually really helped us grow in a lot of ways. So, you know, people say like, don't work for free, or like, you know, you're in the consulting world, you know, you always, people say you undervalue or undercharge when you're starting out, you know, that's a process to working all that stuff out. But I don't know, I think early I thought like, I don't know, I just saw value in like doing that pro bono stuff, both because we have that purpose in our values, but also like because it helped us build our profile too, you know, because we were actually like producing stuff for clients. Whether we got paid or not was different, but you know, like we did the community consultations in Wilcannia around the youth suicide stuff. You know, that was amazing, and that ended up leading to some project work we did later in the year, just unconsciously, you know, as a result. Yeah, it's been exciting. We've done quite a few different pro bono
And
pieces.
Spark as well.
Yeah, Spark. That's you know, today I think as we're recording, you know, we just have contacted most of the families from that sort of stuff too, like. And that was part of that value exercise, and that's been the journey over the last year as well, is trying to work out like what is our purpose in terms of that social enterprise space. Like we've had different things that we funded. You know, we started with a grant program when we first launched last year. Now we've just done the first round of scholarships for young people. So you know, we've got like young people that are doing amazing stuff, like creating their own content. You know, we might have to bring them in here, you know, to work on some of the stuff that we're doing. You know, we've got young people that are Australian champions in the sport that they're doing, but they're living in community, you know, and their families are struggling. And so to be able to provide funding to support some of those goals and aspirations, it's like, for us, it's really important that it's not when we did that work, that it wasn't from a deficits lens. We didn't want, like when we were talking about how people would apply, we didn't want families telling their trauma stories around why they're disadvantaged and why they need this. We wanted it to be about Black excellence and families and young people applying because of those reasons. And so, yeah, it's been amazing. And we couldn't have done it though without the support of other like-minded Black businesses too. So for me, it was really about like getting really interested in Black philanthropy and you know, doing this course not too long ago and realizing like how much Aboriginal businesses there are across the country and even the state here in New South Wales, the amount of money in the Aboriginal business sector, and just really feeling like that we could have an impact if we came together. So yeah, you know, I've got to give a shout out to like people like Dixie Crawford, George Rose, Sky Trudgett, Ellie Davidson, and many others as well that came along and sponsored scholarships for that, because yeah, without them, you know, we couldn't have been able to fund as many as we have had. And who knows where it will go from here. You know, we'll try and review it after we've got all the funds out and look at what the future can look like for our second birthday for what we might do. But yeah, I think the idea is that, you know, maybe we could do like a grant program if we could have a certain number of Aboriginal businesses together. And then we could develop sort of priority areas and invite community organisations to apply. So there's a few different models we're thinking about, but
That'd be cool.
yeah, should be good.
What's been the toughest thing you've had to work on, and how did you sort of keep going through?
I hadn't thought about that for myself. I suppose for me, the thing that comes up is just as a non-Indigenous woman, it's kind of, you know, navigating this work, you know, with my own values and my own understanding and cultural awareness with open ears and being able to kind of listen to what's needed and kind of check my own cultural bias and make sure that I'm doing work that is, you know, it's respectful, it's in line with what we're doing, because I come from, you know, quite an academic background, so it's kind of, there's been a lot of unlearning for me this year and a lot of checking myself, which has been amazing. It's been challenging, but just to kind of delve into the world of First Nation approaches and the idea of two-eyed seeing, and I'm loving it, but it's really challenging for me. So yeah, I think that's been my biggest challenge.
What's been some of the stuff you feel like you've had to unlearn in some ways?
Well, I think, like, especially with a lot of the research stuff, you you can be attached to a hypothesis or an outcome and a way of doing things. And then when you're working with community and you're working with people and there's paradigms and concepts that kind of contradict, you know, that very linear way of A plus B equals C. So it's about kind of going back and, because it's a lot of it's kind of like it's a whole paradigm shift. So it's about creating the space for that to come through in the writing and the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Decolonising your research method.
I was going to use that word, but I'm like, isn't it? I don't know. Can I say that? Yeah.
Yeah, sick. Yeah, cool.
I'll say a little appreciation too, because since working at Impact, you've always taken time out of your day to be very patient and slowly teach me things about research. Like the most recent project we did, when you did a whole, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
The language project that we were doing. You made a whole presentation and you one by one went through it with me so I could understand. And that was, I really appreciate you always taking time. Every single one at Impact, taking time to like slowly explain things to me, because I'm like, what? So it's been good. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We just like spending time with you.
That's it.
But even with that, there was stuff that came up in you know, using language where it's like, from a Western lens, people want to know, you know, what is the word for we use the example, like, what's the word for eel? So we can name a boardroom after an eel, but then like what we're hearing from best practice and the research and what's done in, you know, other communities is it's like you can't use that word in that context. So it's about going back, but the ball's already rolling. People are already doing those things and naming boardrooms and all that kind of thing. So it's like, you know, we need to go back in the way that we're even thinking about this stuff and look at it through a different lens. Are we doing it properly? Are we doing it with permission?
Yes,
all of that.
Exactly. And we talked about that because we were saying, like, you know, there's good intentions. There is such good intentions, people actually wanting to know our language. But like, when you go into a boardroom and they've named it Dinnerwin, it's just like, what's Emu got to do with any of this? And that's not even this mob.
Yeah.
But so just like you were saying, going back, starting again, and actually understanding the purpose and the impacts that language use has. And I learned so much just on that. And we haven't even gotten the chance to present it yet.
Yeah.
You'll get there, Maddie. You'll get there.
That's it.
Just present it here. Here's your panel.
That's it. That's
That was so good, yeah.
And
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and you know, we'll probably, like, we will present that online. I think we have to, because we had so much people participate in that online survey through LinkedIn. So I think out of respect for the people that took the time to participate and share that, we should maybe do like a LinkedIn Live and just present that back, just to share that knowledge, you know, that I guess everyone was a part of producing. So yeah, it was unfortunate we didn't get to present it at the conference, but
we've got it.
yeah,
It's here. It's ready to go.
totally. Yeah, I feel like I've had a rough stretch with like missing conferences and speaking opportunities because of being sick and stuff. It's just been funny how that's worked out this year. If it's not me, it's been my family. But I am excited for us in September though to present at the Social Impact in the Regions conference. That's going to be sick for us, I think. And we'll learn so much too, you know. I think, the person that reached out to us about this, we met years ago when you and I worked in the Bowraville project. And so she was a facilitator at one point, like brought in for a couple of workshops on that project's journey. And she's actually connected with Tracy from up in Coffs. And she reached out to us about doing that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it should be good.
The mob in Coffs Harbour are some of the nicest community I've ever come across. They are so funny.
Yeah.
I love them. So.
Yeah, the Gulbenkian mob are trailblazing, all the language revitalisation and everything they're doing up there is just, really setting the bar high for, all that sort of stuff. So we'll get a chance to see the school though as part of that conference.
Oh, nice.
On the last day, they have like a community, like you can pick where you want to go to see some stuff in in communities, I think we'll probably go check out the school,
Yeah.
given what we're doing. But, yeah.
What about for you, Sam? What was the, I mean, you know, being a business in your first year,
Yeah.
always run into like quite a lot of hurdles. But if you had to pick one, that sort of, I guess, sets the tone for the next year to come, that you've overcome, what would that be for you?
Not going broke.
But how good is that?
Paying my
right?
staff and our people. Oh, look, like biggest learning and stuff. I don't know if I had advice for people listening about like what's been the most critical stuff for us being successful. I think it would be like things like finding your voice and your values. I think are like really pivotal things for us being successful. I think being really clear about our values really cemented like where we were going to go, and then be really confident to start to talk. I think I found I got permission to like start talking about my journey, what I do, and then start to build impact policy, because I started to like come across professionals that I knew from the real world that were like polar opposites to how they presented themselves on LinkedIn and other channels. And I know that's going to sound, I hope I'm not one of them people, but I just started to think like I held myself back for so long about like communication and sharing my story and thought and practice experience, because I just had this imposter syndrome. And then I saw people that just fucking talked underwater, and I just thought, man, you know what, like I have to give myself some permission to really just start to move into this space and start to just share learning, really. And I think that's where it started, really. We don't try and position ourselves as experts, but we do try and share a lot of what we've learned throughout the journey in impact policy and in our careers today. And like I think they've been some of the most successful things for us, really, is that I think that's helped people build a lot of trust in who we are and what we do. And so I think for people listening along that are at the start of that journey, or they're thinking about sort of exploring that sort of stuff, it would be about trusting your voice and finding it and trusting it, and just starting with what you already know, because you've got years and years of practice experience, and just start talking about that. Just start talking about what you've learned, and start sharing that with the world, and you'll be surprised. And I haven't got a massive following or anything like that, but the amount of times I've come across someone and they've said like, oh man, I love the stuff that you posted about this, or I love what you shared there, and they've never engaged with anything I've ever done in the social world. And then so you sort of think like, okay, wow, like some of this sort of stuff is getting to the right people and different things like that. I think is really, really valuable and important. I think, they're probably some of my biggest lessons. I think it's been hard for me, like, because I don't come from a family or a community where people run businesses. No one in my family has an education, let alone ever thought about running a business. And so even just getting comfortable with being in those spaces, particularly as an Aboriginal business, and taking up space is like been really tough. I have like real anxiety around numbers. So even like learning how to do all that sort of stuff, has been really hard, and trying to seek out mentors has been a big thing for me. Like, and trying to build like a community of other people that are on that entrepreneur or business journey as well, to sort of just bounce ideas off and share learnings with has been really critical. I think like they're probably some of my biggest things. I learned a lot of expensive lessons, wasted a lot of money making choices that weren't the right choices, and I've learned those mistakes now. I'll probably make them again, because that's how I learn. But I think for the next year though, moving forward, I think we've really established ourselves in terms of our ability to deliver. I think we've got a real great track record over the last year and a bit of high profile projects that we've been a part of, and I think we need to start to think about how we also develop our own internal services that we can offer. So, for example, we've been working on this online training for a significant period of time now. I think we're at the stage now where we can start to really build that. So I think for the next year, I'd like to see us really start to position some products as well that people can engage with. So, you know, we've got that online training, we've talked about other things that we want to do as well. And I really want to just have that sort of stuff built and have that ready to go for 2024. I think there's a few programs that I want to be able to offer. You know, we've run like the Senior Leaders Aboriginal Mentoring Program before, but I want to actually develop it as a offering that people can easily engage in and uptake with. So I want people to be able to come to Impact Policy for projects and support. Then I also want us to be able to be known for a suite of products that can really add value and capability for different clients and people too, you know. So yeah, I think that's sort of where we're sitting and where we're thinking about.
A lot of exciting projects in the pipeline for you guys. I think it's really important, a lot of the stuff you said around voice, especially because in the space that like both you and I work in, we're a lot of times giving voices to those that sometimes don't have voices.
Yeah.
So I think you finding your own is, you know, amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think those projects coming up are, I think, going to be really influential in your space. And speaking about projects coming up, what is everyone excited about leading into the future for Impact Policy?
I'm keen for the Wallama list.
Yep.
More community engagement.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, for me, it's not a specific project, but it's just noticing, like, as we've expanded as a team, like when I started, it was like, I was learning from you, you were probably learning a bit from me, and and then Andrew and Josh as well, just kind of, we'd all learn and grow from each other. And then now Maddie's come on board, well, you're on board from the start, but it just adds new dimensions the more we expand and the more we partner with different people, and then the different people that we've partnered throughout the year just helps us see things in a new light, identify new opportunities. Like, you bring a totally different skill set to me, but now it's like we've got this combined skill set that's really exciting. So I'm excited to just see that grow and develop.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Definitely. Yeah, me too. I think, and you know, like, this is probably like the core crew at Impact Policy, but you're right, like, there's been other people throughout the past year and a bit that have come in on different projects and really added some value and stuff, and are still part of, like, you know, the team broadly, which is, I think the future is exciting in terms of where we can go and what we can do. And I don't know, I think for us, I think it's about just not losing sight of why we do what we do as well. I think it's really easy to get caught up in, like, growing, and I think it's just I think someone told me that's a bit further along the journey, you know, these first couple of years, just get your house in order. And I think I have to keep reminding myself of that, because I get caught up in, like, you know, these opportunities that can come our way and things like that. But I think for the most part, you know, we've got to also practice, like, being still and being thankful for everything that we have had so far. So many businesses don't survive the first year, right? So we're already, like, ahead of the curve in some ways. So that's been good. I think the Impact Policy podcast hopefully will continue to go from strength to strength. That's been like a learning experience in itself, you know. I think that's probably like something to what you asked me earlier about advice, or what to think about moving forward, is about, like, I think that's something that we do really well at Impact Policy, is like we actually try and add value with content that we create, because there's a lot of different consulting organisations in our space that do great work, but I think I feel really confident that we lead the space in a lot of ways in terms of content and adding value through the knowledge that we share and that we put out. And that's something I'm really proud of, because I think like it's bigger than just us responding to clients that want us to do something for them. It's about actually taking the experience that we've learned throughout our journeys, or the people that we've partnered with along the way, and coming together and adding knowledge to the sector. And that's impact, and then the podcast space we've been able to have here has been a way to really elevate some of those stories of lived experience. So that's been something that, probably been a real highlight, something that we've been proud of, but a learning experience too. Yeah.
I'm just excited to work with you some more. I think that first project, what was it, like 7 years ago, in Barra, sort of set the tone for, I guess, the type of people and the type of projects that we want to work on as a company. I think partnering with Impact and being able to, I guess, for one, give a voice, shed light, and really impact through storytelling has been amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's for people that are listening, along like that first project that we worked on like 7 years ago was like a really complex, sensitive project in regional New South Wales, and but it was definitely one as well that really sparked, I guess, sparked the impact, no pun intended, of like why it's so important though for storytelling and communications to be a big part of policy and projects. I think, like we provide communication services, but most companies, that's all that they do. And, in our space, like we specialise in policy and like the public sector for the most part. And there's often a big disconnect between how the two complement each other. And I think like that project we did years ago really cemented how critical it was for communications to be integral to the policy work that they were doing at the moment. And I still take those learnings today to what we're doing. Yeah. I think sometimes it's just about trying to translate that for our clients to understand that, like, if we get engaged to do policy work, finding a way to incorporate communications into that sort of overall plan or strategy is actually really important. Yeah. And they're not two separate pieces of work. They need to be thought about as a complete puzzle. There's some amazing Aboriginal communications companies that are doing great work. Not a lot that specialise in like our space in the policy world. But I think that's something that sort of really separates us, is the ability to connect those dots and do that stuff well. But
Yeah, probably a whole podcast in itself. But I guess for those listening now, why is that so important, that connect? I guess briefly, because I think you can touch on it again in another podcast or blog, but I guess briefly, like, why is the connect between policy and comms so integral to the work that you do and the way that you communicate?
Yeah, I think it's important because, a lot of, like, I never thought like that I will work in policy. And in a lot of ways, I still don't think I work in policy, even though we're called impact policy. In a lot of ways, it's the services that we deliver are what inform the development of good policy. And so for me, communications is critical because for our communities, for Aboriginal communities, but for many other communities in this country, it's been the impact of failed past policies that have really disadvantaged many of our communities. And so, that's a broad statement, but there's many ways in which that sort of happens. And communications is critical. Being able to communicate the impact of the development of something for the communities on the ground that are impacted by it is pivotal. How can you develop something for a community group or part of this state and not have anyone really understand on the ground what that means for them? How can you affect meaningful participation in the development of that work? How can you expect meaningful participation in the evaluation of that work and the redevelopment of that stuff? So like communications is critical at all stages of policy. And for a long time, I think we sort of have just thought about communication in terms of from an engagement perspective. So, focus groups, workshops, whatever. But there's also for blackfellas, for other diverse communities as well, though, storytelling and participation and oral engagement is one of the most critical engagement tools. And so for us to start to bring that in as well as a part of communications and a part of participation really helps to increase that level of visibility across all those stages of policy. So for us, I think it's about really just starting to see those pieces of the puzzle as equal to each other on that journey, and that's where a lot of the wheels can fall off sometimes, is we start to think about development of anything in the public sector in a very like colonial lens of like, you only health does this, or education does this, or policy does that, communications does that, and all these departments, they all operate independent of each other. Whereas we know we know best practice in community socially is to do things holistically. We know that when work's done well, it's done well in partnership and together, but often when these things roll out in practice, they're done in isolation and separate of each other. So it would make no sense for me for someone to come to impact policy and say, Holly and Maddie, can you work with us on the development of this engagement piece that's going to inform this strategy? And you guys go, yep. And then they go, all right, thanks for that work. Now, Andrew and Josh, we want you to come in and do the comms piece. But you guys aren't connected to the work. You haven't been a part of the research and development of that work. You don't have the lens around the impact and the why. And so they don't talk to each other. Whereas if you can come to somewhere like impact policy, and there's others out there too, where all these pieces are part of the same puzzle, then you've got that continuity of communication, of engagement, of impact at the end result of that project. So that's what I see as best practice when we think about this sort of stuff. But I still think as a sector, we're probably on a bit of a journey though in terms of how we do that. And really, we're probably a bit of a niche too in terms of being able to provide those services, because often, like, you're an expert and a specialist in your space, and most businesses are, right? So we're sort of trying to say to people in the policy world that, to inform good policy and projects, these are the sort of pillars of what you need, and this is where you can come to get them. I think that's sort of where we're at.
Any last reflections on the year?
I think maybe just a reflection on the podcast as a journey itself, and I touched on it earlier when I said like how important it is to create content, and I think that we do that really well. And I think it's been a massive learning opportunity too, though. Like, I have to thank people that have taken the time to subscribe and follow and listen and give us feedback. Sometimes you wonder if anyone's listening or watching along. But, we get messages from people that have listened that have been significantly impacted by some of the stories that we've shared. We had Joe Gaines' story about domestic and family violence that really resonated with so many people that had been victims of that as children, or in DV relationships too. And so and that's just one episode. We had the Dylan Voller episode as well, where the similar sorts of stories came out with people inboxing us. We had Osher Gunsberg share his story around mental health. And, it's funny, like, he's the most famous person on the podcast, but it's been the most least engaged with. And I remember you were saying, well, that sort of talks to what your target audience is, which is really fair reflection too. But, I really wanted to share stories like his and others, because, like, impact policy, I want it to be somewhere that, like, people come, they share our values, but there's also like a personal connection to this sort of stuff. It's not just like, here's the theory and the practice and the real stuff. I want you to be able to come and see yourself. I really valued Osher's experience because he really debunks that it's okay to not be okay, and sharing his really personal journey around mental health and also functioning really well. I think was really important for a lot of people to hear. And I got like a handful of messages from people, even though it was the lowest viewed, a handful of messages from people that really, it meant a lot to. So that was really important for me personally, as well. And then, we've got really exciting guests coming up too. And that's been one of the hardest things is like, we don't want Impact Policy podcast to be like a spam podcast where we're just getting episodes out for the sake of getting episodes out.
Yeah.
We really want to have episodes that really add value to practitioners and people in this sector, that add value personally for professionals as well. And yeah, are exciting and engaging. So it's been funny trying to find the balance between like, and I think that's the thing though that I like is that people come on the podcast and it isn't just like all public servants, or it isn't just all black fellas, or it isn't just all like young people. There's a whole range of different demographics, but they all sort of connect under this, the core values really of what we're about. So yeah, it's been good, but it's definitely been like a learning experience hosting, you know, and trying to find my own voice too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're on the right track.
100%.
Definitely.
And I think we've got a podcast episode each with each of you at one stage, exploring all the different themes that you guys have touched on, you know. I think even what you said though about like being a non-Aboriginal professional in this sort of policy space and that journey, I think in itself is so valuable because that's the core, a lot of the core engagement that we get is from non-Aboriginal allies that are doing critical work, that are looking for more opportunities to build their capability. And I think, you know, sharing those learnings and stories is the best way that people
100%.
learn. So, you know, same thing with you, Brad.
Episode 1 million, I'll be there.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know. Overall, it's just been a really crazy journey. I think can be really hard at times, you know. I went into this with like a real gamble, you know, but like people that know me would know that like I don't have a lot to lose, like in a lot of ways. So it was either like, that's one thing too, like for people listening around anxiety. Like I've battled like anxiety for a long time, and I think you can really, anxiety is a funny thing because it takes you always to the worst case scenario. But I always think about like my anxiety as like all these different doors, and the chances are that you go through the worst door is always like 0.1%, but your anxiety always takes you to the door. And so for me, it was, I'm always consciously like bringing myself back to like you'll rarely enter that door on this journey. So keep trusting yourself and go through the next step or the next step or the next step.
Definitely.